Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a truly unique linguistic expedition, really getting into some fascinating source material you've brought us.
Hmm.
We're talking about these transcripts from YouTube videos featuring something called the Doza Crew,
Yeah,
and they're doing this really intense German wordplay, these tongue twisters.
that's right. And looking at these transcripts, titles like AP, Fluidultentarium, Vertakte Bath, Zungentrummer,
Hmm.
it's pretty clear this isn't just like casual language practice.
No way.
This feels focused, rigorous, almost like an athletic kind of linguistic exercise.
Absolutely. So our mission with this deep dive is basically to take this stack of sources you've shared, unpack what this specific kind of word, acrobatics, as they seem to call it, performed by the Doza crew,
Hmm.
actually involves,
Yeah.
and try to figure out what we can learn about, language, articulation, maybe even performance from this stuff.
Because as you start digging into these transcripts, you see pretty quickly it's not just a random bunch of hard sentences.
Right.
There's a clear intention here, a method, and like you said, one key source really suggests there's an artistry to it all.
Yeah, that source being Vortaktebath, source O3, which kind of lays out the philosophy, doesn't it? It gives us this amazing description. Verduria Wörter bis sie brechen.
Twisting words until they break. It's quite a powerful opening image. What does that really suggest to you about the whole process? Is it about finding where pronunciation just physically fails? Or maybe where the structure of the language itself sort of feels like it's collapsing under the speed or the complexity?
Well, just based on that phrase and kind of looking ahead at the examples we have, it definitely feels like they're pushing boundaries, like exploring the absolute tensile strength of language,
Hmm.
How fast, how dense, how complex can you actually make it before it audibly fractures, or maybe before the speaker just can't articulate it precisely anymore. It feels like testing the breaking point.
Exactly. And the source itself frames this whole exploration using this metaphor of Labyrinth der Sprache, a labyrinth of language. So the exercise is documented in the other transcripts. Those specific tongue twisters and complex phrases, you can see them as the really intricate paths they're trying to navigate
Yeah.
inside this linguistic maze.
Okay.
They're not just lost in there. They seem to be deliberately exploring its trickiest corners.
And navigating a labyrinth like that takes immense skill, focus.
Yeah.
And the source explicitly calls this Wortfluss, this flow through the maze, both Kunstwerk, artwork, and acrobatics. That pairing seems really central to understanding what they're doing in these sources.
It really is. Calling the word flow Kunstwerk, artwork, that highlights the aesthetic side. So what makes it art?
Yeah, good question.
Well, the source gives us clues, like lauten die tanzen, sounds that dance, and versmaß wie ein Werk, verse measured like clockwork. This suggests the beauty or the artistry maybe comes from the very precise rhythm, the musicality of the sounds themselves, and just the sheer, seemingly effortless flow they achieve when they perform it well. It's the soundscape they're creating.
Sounds that dance, measured like clockwork. Okay, that definitely adds a layer beyond just saying tricky words fast. And then the acrobatic part, what's acrobatic about it?
Well, that points directly to the physical and mental agility needed. The physical acrobatics are pretty obvious when you even just try to say some of these phrases.
Right.
The rapid, precise movements of your tongue, lips, jaw, even controlling your breath. It's like doing complex gymnastics, but with your mouth.
Yeah.
Then the mental acrobatics come in, just processing these really intricate sequences, holding them in your memory, anticipating the transitions, and then executing them perfectly at speed. It's navigating that linguistic labyrinth, but basically at a sprint.
So the other transcripts, the ones filled with all those dense word sequences, they're essentially the demonstration of this Kunstwerk and acrobatic in action.
Pretty much.
And Source O3 explicitly calls this whole verbal performance their mission.
Their mission, yeah.
Yeah.
And it gives a really clear statement of purpose. Schlag jede Silbe mit Präzision, scharfer Zungenschlag meiner Mission.
Hit every syllable with precision, sharp tongue, strike my mission. Wow.
Yeah, so it's not about mumbling or just getting close.
Approximation.
No, it's about deliberate, accurate, almost forceful articulation of every single syllable.
Sharp tongue strike. It sounds almost like percussive, even a bit violent in its intent for clarity and impact. Knowing that, reading that in Source O3, it totally changes how you look at the lists of difficult phrases in the other sources, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
They become the training exercises or maybe the performance pieces for this mission of precise, sharp articulation.
Exactly. And the source drives home the difficulty and the mastery needed with phrases like Springübersetze wie ein Parkourläufer.
Jumping or navigating like a parkour runner.
Yeah, and ringen die Krone der Verse.
Struggling for the crown of verses.
Right. So it frames it as this athletic, maybe even competitive pursuit, but all within the realm of language.
A high-stakes linguistic sport. I love that. The parkour analogy really captures that sense of fluidly getting over these complex structural obstacles. And ringen die Krone, wrestling for the crown, that implies this dedication to being the best, achieving the absolute highest level of verbal mastery in this specific art form.
It really does.
It gives context to why someone would put themselves through these seemingly painful verbal twists and turns. It's for the crown, the mastery, the perfection of that scharfer Zungenschlag.
It definitely shifts how we see it. It's not just hard to say anymore. It's more like a demonstration of peak linguistic performance.
Okay, right. Let's really get into this then. Let's take that framework from Source 03, this whole idea of Wortaktebath, twisting words until they break, but with precision, sharp strikes, and let's apply it to the specific examples we see across the other sources you shared. We could maybe group them by the kinds of linguistic hurdles they throw up.
Yeah, that seems like a logical way to approach the labyrinth. And one of the most common hurdles we see is just the intense, rapid repetition of certain initial sounds, these really dense alliterative chains.
Yes. The F and F sounds jump out immediately. We've got variations like der Frostes wird hiert, K sie laufen setmal fischere zäh frostet und der Frost schon hat wie alle till Ulf für sich her. Oh, from Source 01. Der nach Frost verse Fischer und versteht sie alles ist sicher offen from Source mit Seven.
Right.
And this really dense one. For Frost, ist der Froster, Frost, im Froster, Frost, frostet der Frost, der Fosch, from Source 10.
Okay, let's look at that last one, Source 10 with the frost. The challenge here, the acrobatics, isn't just the repetition. It's the super rapid transition between the F sound, which is just a puff of air through the lips, right?
Yeah.
And then the R cluster, which immediately adds that R sound. Now, in German, depending on the dialect, that R can be a trill at the front or more of a raspy sound in the back of the throat.
Right.
Either way, switching instantly from that clean F to the R sound, then maybe back to a standalone F or another F that demands incredibly fast and precise changes in your mouth shape and how you direct the air. Doing it multiple times right in a row, like Froster Frosch and Frosch Froster. That's the linguistic version of a really fast gymnastic routine, constant, precise repositioning. The breaking point happens if you drop the R, or if the sounds just blur together, losing that crucial precision.
Wow. I can feel my tongue getting twisted just thinking about it. Needs total control.
It does.
And then there's that onslaught of Bs and BRs in sources 02 and 06. Bernd Bolt, bürgerlicher Brauhausbesitzer, bei Braune berühmte bayerische Behymne, beginnt wieder brav Bierbrauer Burschen bereiten, beständig bitteres braunes bayerisches.
That's a real marathon of the B sound.
Yeah.
Which is implosive, right? You stop the air with your lips and release it suddenly.
Proper, yeah.
And the brie adds the R immediately after, just like we saw with fair. So you're constantly doing this quick lip closure and release, often followed straight away by that tricky R. And the sheer length of this sentence means you have to keep up that precise action and your breath control for a really long sequence.
Endurance test.
Exactly. It tests endurance alongside precision. It's not just hitting one B sharply, but hitting every single B and B with that exact same scharfer Zungenschlag all the way through the sentence. That's the acrobatic of sustained, rapid, plosive production.
And the interplay of F and FL sounds in Fisch, Fische, 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 Fisch, Fische, Fritze, Flöte, 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 mit flötenden Flöten, frische Fluschen, Flöte. That's from sources 02 and 06 again. That adds a different kind of transition challenge, right?
Yeah, with FL, you're adding an L sound right after the F. The L typically involves your tongue tip touching the ridge just behind your front teeth while the air flows around the sides.
Okay.
So the transition from F, which is just lips, to FL, which is lips, plus that specific tongue tip position inside airflow, that's a different set of muscle coordination than F. Rapidly switching between simple F, fish, frische, flöte, flöten. It means your tongue and lips have to be incredibly nimble, constantly reforming the shape and redirecting the airflow. That's the acrobatic of rapid shifts between articulation points.
Even a sound that seems simpler, like M, becomes a challenge when you repeat it that fast.
Yeah.
Like in Montags macht mir mein Omtermotors, maar leistens mag maxens milk mit marmlelet mampfen. Also, sources O2 and O6.
Right. The M is a nasal sound. Air goes through your nose, lips are closed. The difficulty here isn't the M itself usually. It's keeping the words distinct when they all start with that same lip closure and nasal release.
Ah, I see.
Doing it quickly needs really sharp, distinct lip closures and releases for each word. Otherwise, they just merge into one long hum.
Right.
That's the acrobacy of clear, distinct nasal articulation at speed. If you don't strike each M sharply, the whole thing just turns to mush, like you said.
The German sound is famously tricky for English speakers, and these examples really lean into that difficulty. 7 Schneeskiebeschippen, 7 Schneeschaufelschaufel, 7 Schaufeln Schnee, and tschechische Regisseur schätzen schöne chinesische Schüsselchen. Again, sources O2 and O6.
Yeah, the sh sound, like our sh. It needs you to shape your tongue just right and push air through that narrow gap behind your front teeth. Repeating that sound quickly, especially when it's combined with other consonants like in Schneeskieber or Schallfilm, requires really fine muscle control to keep that specific tongue shape and airflow going while you move on to the next sound.
Okay.
And that second example, it adds the ch sound like in Czech, right before the ch, creating this complex cluster, followed by sh in Tschechische.
Wow.
Saying tschechische Regisseur schätzen schöne chinesische Schüsselchen rapidly and clearly. That's a serious test of controlling the front of your mouth and coordinating those stops and hisses. It truly demands that scharfer Zungenschlag to cut through all those she's sounds cleanly.
And the German R. Whether it's rolled or more guttural, repeating it is tough. We see a rasantes Rumpelstilken Ruppelrollos rauf und runter from source 16. And the sheer density in hundertärtige Hundehetzen, hinterhundertfartigen Hasen, her hinterhundertfartigen Hasenhetzner, hundertfartige Hunde, also source 16.
Yeah, depending on how someone pronounces their R, it needs either rapid vibration, a trill, or a very precise constriction and friction way back in the throat.
Right.
Sustaining that rapid movement or constriction all the way through a phrase like hundertfartig Hundehetzen hinter hundertfartigen Hasen her is physically demanding. That's the acrobatic of fast, continuous R production, while also juggling other sounds like H and different vowels.
Yeah.
The rhythm and the sound pattern here also feed into that Kunstwerk idea that cascade of R sounds creates a really distinct sound texture.
The sharp Z sound, the teeth sound often combined with W, that's another hurdle. We have Sie Ziegensetzer, Zemen zum Zahnarzt, zum Zementieren from source 06, attributed to Uwe Lefmurad.
Right.
And the variations on zwischen Zweizweigen, zwischen Schmalben, that's in sources 01 and 07. And then zwischen Zweizweigen sitzen zwei Testtexte, Texten, Tester, Testtexter, Texten, Testtext, also from Uwe Lefmurad in source 06.
Okay, the Z is an affricate. It starts like a T, a quick air stop with the tongue tip, and immediately releases into an S, pushing air through a narrow gap. So it's a rapid two-part sound.
TS, yeah.
Then the ZW cluster adds the W sound right after that TS, so your lips have to round really quickly right after the tongue action. Phrases like zwischen Zweigen Zwitschern demand extremely fast, coordinated movements of the tongue tip for the T and C as bits of the Z, plus the lip rounding for the W.
Wow.
And those variations like Sechen and test text and source 06 show how they play with words that sound similar but are structurally different. That makes the acrobatics cognitive too. You have to navigate these similar sounding traps.
Oh, okay.
It's the Lavender Sprache at its best, where similar looking paths can lead you into linguistic pitfalls if you're not perfectly precise.
Beyond just initial sounds or single consonants, the sources hit us with challenges based on difficult consonant clusters inside the words. K is a good example. In Klausknopf fliegt Dördelüse KN Krüdelklöster Kipselit Kusnopf. Sources 02 and 06. And Kleine Nussnecke necking it goes Nussnecke. That's source 10.
KN is a tricky cluster.
Yeah.
You stop the air way back in your throat for the K, and then immediately, with no vowel sound in between, you redirect the airflow through your nose for the N.
KN.
Saying nacken or nodelis rapidly and cleanly needs really fast, subtle coordination between the back of your tongue and your soft palate, the bit at the roof of your mouth controlling nasal airflow. Doing it over and over challenges that specific transition point. It's a smaller, maybe more intricate piece of the overall acrobatic.
And speaking of intricate pieces, the Kugelschnitzer passage from source 10 feels like the final boss of consonant cluster mastery. Kugelschnitzer, die auf 17 Schnitzsitzen sitzen und mit ihrem spitzen Schnitzernritzen in ihr Schnitzel schlitzen, wobei sie schwitzen, sind 17 Schwitzen, Schnitzen, die auf dem Schnittsitzen sitzen, benutzende Witzit.
Wow. Yeah, this is where that phrase, verdrehe Wörters bis sie brechen, becomes something you can almost feel.
Totally.
It's just a sustained assault of difficult sounds. Shit, spick, dit, zugeschnitzen, stitzen, schmitzen, schwitzen. You've got combined with N, L, P, W. Each word needs a precise, rapid setup of the tongue and airflow. The sheer density and repetition of these sounds over such a long sentence just pushes articulation to its absolute limit.
Yeah.
It needs not just physical agility for each cluster, but incredible breath control and mental stamina to keep up that precision of that Schlag jede Silbe mit precision throughout the entire sequence.
It's intense.
It's peak acrobatic, definitely, where failing to maintain that Schärfer Zungenschlag on even one syllable could cause the whole thing to just brechen, to fall apart. And the artistry, the Kunstwerk here, is in how deliberately constructed this obstacle course of sound is. It feels designed to be both really impressive when someone masters it and audibly challenging when anyone tries it.
It's less like linguistic weightlifting and more like, I don't know, linguistic parkour through a minefield.
That's a good way to put it.
We also see other clusters like KL, G, GR, targeted, sometimes in simpler phrases like Wenn Klappergas blüht, bleibt Klappergas immer Nosche from source 16.
Right. Phrases like that might seem simpler on the surface, but combining a stop sound, KGB, with a liquid sound, KGD needs precise timing. You have to release the first consonant just right and immediately position the tongue for the liquid sound that follows. They're like the building blocks for the more complex acrobatic.
Okay. And beyond clusters, some examples just focus on sheer length, either of words or whole sentences. Those infamous German compound words are perfect for this, aren't they? Like Dampfschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitänstelle Werktäterstin in source 16.
Yes, deputy assistant and captain of a steamship company. The challenge there isn't necessarily super difficult individual sounds, but just stringing together, 24 syllables? With clarity.
Yeah.
Maintaining the correct stress pattern, doing it quickly without stumbling. It requires sustained breath support and focus to make sure each syllable gets that precision, especially those tricky transition points between the component words like Gesellschafts or Kapitänstelle. That's the acrobatic of endurance and clear articulation over a really long, complex word structure.
And long sentences designed for complexity, too. Like, kannst du den konstantinopolinischen Dudelsackpfeifer nachpfeifen, wenn der Pfeifer Pfeif entspricht und keiner dieser Sätze weicht?
From source 06, the Ovel F. Murad section. This one combines length with that repeated PF sound, Pfeifer, Pfeifen. PF is another one of those affricates, starting like a P, lip stop in the air, and ending like an F, air through lips and teeth.
PF, okay.
Doing that transition rapidly and repeatedly throughout a long sentence while keeping the overall sentence flow and meaning intact, that's a significant test of coordination and breath management. It's applying that Schärfer Zungenschlag across a whole phrase built around one specific, tricky sound combination.
The sources also threw a challenge at us based on repetition and just slight variations in structure, like the Bibliothekarin example. Eine Diplom-Bibliothekarin ist Bibliothekarin mit Diplom. Eine Bibliothekarin mit Diplom ist eine Diplom-Bibliothekarin. That's sources 02 and 06 again.
Right. The sounds themselves aren't particularly hard there, but the difficulty, the acrobatic, is more in the mental agility you need to track those subtle changes in word order. Bibliothekarin mit Diplom versus Diplom-Bibliothekarin, while repeating the phrase quickly. Your brain and your mouth want to just fall into a simple repetitive loop, but you have to keep conscious control to execute the exact sequence correctly. It's a test of attention to detail and structural precision, not just phonetic skill.
The Walzwerk passage in source 16 feels like another structural challenge, built entirely around repetition.
Wussten Sie schon, dass in den Reden von Walzwerken und Walzwerken die Rede ist?
Gott sei Dank ist es aber relativ selten, dass ein Walzwerk besucht oder Walzwerk in der Umgebung der Walzwerke erbraucht werden. Wenn allerdings Walzwerk ein Walzwerk baut, handelt das jetzt demzufolge um ein Walzwerk. Wenn dieser dann auch noch daran arbeitet, ist es dann auch richtig ein Walzwerk.
This is pure linguistic labyrinth navigation. It's much less about difficult sounds and more about following this incredibly convoluted, repetitive logical structure dictated solely by the word Walzwerk, rolling mill. Yep. The acrobatic here feels almost entirely cognitive. You have to mentally jump between the different grammatical roles and contexts of Walzwerk while articulating it clearly and rapidly. It forces intense focus to avoid getting lost in the repetition and just tripping over the unexpected twists in the logic.
Yeah?
And the Erübrigen Erweitern Ausschließen section in that same source does something pretty similar, playing with abstract concepts in a repetitive sort of mind-bending structure.
It's like a verbal Rubik's Cube. And the Dackel example in source 10, wenn Dackel zu mein Dackel nochmal Dackel sagt, krieg ein Dackel von mein Dackel, dass dein Dackel nicht mehr Dackel sagen kann. That uses word repetition within a little story for its challenge.
The repetition of Dackel is almost hypnotic there. The acrobatic is in keeping the distinct pronunciation of the word while embedding it in this slightly absurd, recursive sentence structure. It requires finding a rhythm and sticking to it precisely to avoid stumbling over the repeated sound.
Some examples are basically mini-stories, crafted specifically for articulation difficulty. Herr und Frau Lück über eine Brücke, da kann eine Mücklücke ins Namech seine Krücke und schlug Frau Lung. Deswegen dann Frau Lücke mit der Mücke und der Krücke im Genicke tot umfiel.
From source 10, that's a prime example. It's a narrative built around that tricky interplay of L, K, and M sounds.
That one's a fantastic blend, isn't it? Narrative and phonetic challenge. The sounds, L uses the tongue tip, K, back of the tongue, M, lips, nose. They use very different parts of the mouth.
Right.
Rapidly switching between them, like in Mücklicke, Herr Lück seine Krücke, Frau Lücke mit der Mücke und der Krücke im Genicke, requires constant, precise repositioning of your articulators while you're also keeping track of the story's sequence.
Wow.
It demands both physical agility and the mental agility to maintain the narrative coherence through that phonetic obstacle course. It's the parkour runner, jumping through words, keeping the flow and the purpose. Simpler scenario-based ones like als Anna abends as Anna abend Ananas, and sa essen IT Afrikaner aller abends appetitliche Ananas. Sources 02 and 06, they focus on easier sounds but build the challenge through repetition within that narrative frame.
Yeah, those feel like more foundational exercises. They focus on establishing a fluid, rhythmic repetition of specific vowel sounds and simple initial consonants.
Yeah.
They train the basic Wortfluss and that idea of kein Verweilen, keeping a continuous flow without hesitation.
More complex narratives like Die Katze fasst den Saumarkt, nun kann sie nicht mehr Mau sagen, or Herr von Hahn, darf ich's wagen, Sie zu fragen, welchen Kragen Sie getragen, als Sie lagen krank am Magen in der Stadt zu Kopenhagen. Both from source 16, they integrate a wider range of sounds and more grammatical complexity into the story structure.
Right. The Katze one plays with the sound of Mao and the physical impossibility implied in the story. The Copenhagen example is a full question, combining H, W, K, G, R, M, N sounds. These require navigating complex grammatical structures right alongside the phonetic challenges. It demands a really high level of integrated linguistic control. It's the acrobatic applied to producing full sentences.
And finally, we see examples that just play purely on sound similarity or internal rhyme. Brautkleid bleibt Bandbots and Braut and Blautkap bleibt Blautkraut. Those are classic tongue twisters, right? Based on how close Braut, bride, Blautkraut, red cabbage, and maybe the name burnt bolts sound.
Exactly. The acrobatics there are all about fine phonetic discrimination and execution. You have to produce sounds that are phonetically very close, Braut, Blautkraut, distinctly and rapidly, relying on really subtle differences in articulation, like the initial BL versus B or the vowels. It challenges the precision of your sound formation, making sure each strike is distinct and sharp, preventing those similar sounds from just blurring together.
Other examples repeat sounds within words or short phrases, like Teigmuschel, Schleimschwein, from that ULF Murad section in source 06, or Whiskey Mixer from source 16.
Yeah, Teigmuschel repeats the I sound, Schleimschwein repeats Schleim. Whiskey Mixer combines the W with that internal isk sound. These train the ability to keep a specific vowel or internal sound sequence accurate within a phrase. Requires consistent mouth shape, consistent airflow. It's focused, almost surgical, phonetic precision.
Wow. Okay. So looking at all these examples through that lens of source 03, the alliteration, the clusters, the length, the structure, the stories, the sound play, what makes these specifically such demanding Worttaktobath, drawing only from what the sources tell us, concepts like precision, sharp tongue strike, no lingering.
Well, based just on the sources, the difficulty seems to come from a few interconnected things that really push the boundaries of articulation and cognition. First, it's the sheer density and frequency of challenging sounds or clusters packed so close together. It forces rapid, continuous articulation of difficult transitions. That seems to be the core of the acrobatic. Second, It's definitely the speed required, which is emphasized by that kind for violin, no lingering, no hesitation rule.
Right.
And that speed magnifies any tiny imprecision, making the breaking of words much more likely if the precision isn't absolutely perfect.
So speed isn't just about being fast for its own sake. It's actually a necessary component that stresses the articulation enough to really test true precision.
Precisely. Third, it's the combination of sounds. Either sounds that don't usually appear next to each other, often in an everyday German, or really complex sequences, like in that monster Kugelschnitzer example.
Yeah.
These demand unusual or extremely rapid coordinations of the tongue, lips, airflow. And fourth, for examples like Walswerk or Bibliothekarin, the challenge comes from the structure itself. Those highly repetitive or slightly varying patterns that demand intense mental focus and precision just to navigate the Labyrinth der Sprache without making a mistake. It feels like it's pushing the limits of both the physical vocal apparatus and the cognitive processing needed for rapid, accurate speech. Every syllable has to be that sharp tongue strike.
So what does this all mean then? Why would someone dedicate themselves to this level of really rigorous linguistic exercise? It's clearly something way more intentional, more demanding than just, trying to say, she sells seashells.
Well, going back to the Vortaktabath source, those ideas of artwork and acrobatic seem to give us the purpose. One key goal is undoubtedly the ultimate mastery of articulation.
Okay.
This practice trains the ability to produce pretty much any sound or sequence in the language with absolute clarity, speed, and precision, achieving that perfect scharfer Zungenschlag on every single syllable.
It's like a high-performance athlete training, isn't it? To execute complex movements flawlessly under pressure. A linguistic athlete, like you said earlier.
Exactly. Training the vocal muscles and the neural pathways that control speech to perform at a truly elite level. But that Kunstwerk, the artwork aspect, suggests it's also about performance art.
Ah, right.
It's not just about being able to say it, but about how it sounds when performed, the rhythm, the flow, that almost musical quality of Lauten die Tanzen sounds that dance. It's turning language itself into a kind of virtuosic performance, measured with the regularity of clockwork or work.
So the performance is the art form.
Yeah.
And it must demand incredible mental focus, right? Linguistic agility, too. Navigating the twists of Kugelschnitzer or that structural maze of Walzwerk. It just can't happen without intense concentration.
Absolutely. That Springübersätze wie ein Parkourläufer analogy really highlights this mental part. It requires rapidly processing the linguistic terrain ahead and executing the correct verbal jumps and landings. And that kind for violin rule is crucial here. You can't really pause to think or reorient yourself in the middle of the labyrinth. You have to move fluidly, relying on trained reflexes and total focus. It trains the mind to keep pace with the demands of high-speed, high-precision articulation.
So for you listening, why might this intense practice, as these sources reveal it, be interesting or maybe even useful?
Well, while you might not be aiming to become a Vortaktabath yourself,
Probably not.
understanding this practice does offer insight into the mechanics of spoken language. It really highlights the physical dexterity and the mental focus involved in even just ordinary speech.
True.
Trying even a few of these examples yourself carefully, maybe slowly at first without straining, can make you much more aware of how you actually form sounds, where your tongue is, how you're using your breath. It could potentially help improve your own clarity and precision just by making you more conscious of that sharp tongue strike needed for clear articulation. It's a deep dive into the physical and cognitive effort behind speaking fluently.
And the real aha moment here, drawing it all completely from the sources, is realizing that these transcripts aren't just random, funny, difficult sentences.
No.
They are the concrete evidence of a deliberate, multifaceted practice. It's a linguistic training regimen, it's a form of performance art, it's a mental discipline, all aimed at achieving this extraordinary level of verbal mastery, precision, and flow, specifically in German. It's that Ringen, die Krondevers, wrestling for the crown.
And when you view them through the lens of Source 03, these examples really elevate beyond just simple Zungenbrecher or Tonquisters as we usually think of them. The sources frame this as something much more intense, performative, artistic.
Yeah. The focus on artwork, acrobatics, and especially precision and sharp tongue places this practice firmly in the realm of serious vocal training, doesn't it?
It really does.
It aligns with the kind of dedication you'd expect from anyone for whom absolute verbal clarity and control are essential actors nailing complex dialogue, public speakers delivering impactful phrases without a single error, maybe even singers focusing on perfect diction. The sources imply that this intense focus is the pathway to true verbal excellence.
It shows that language, when pushed to this level, becomes a physical and mental performance that demands rigorous training, much like playing a musical instrument or mastering an athletic discipline.
We've certainly journeyed deep today, starting from that abstract concept of Wartaktabath, the word acrobatics laid out in Source 03, then digging into the very concrete, sometimes jaw-dropping examples across the other sources, and finally exploring the potential purpose and that quest for mastery behind such an intense linguistic practice.
The sources, taken together, really reveal a fascinating and rigorous form of linguistic training or performance art. It's deeply rooted in the unique phonetic landscape of German, and it demands precision, speed, and that ability to navigate complexity like a verbal parkour runner.
And thank you for bringing these incredible sources to our attention. They offer a truly unique window into the dedication and skill involved in pushing the boundaries of spoken language, basically turning mere words into an athletic art form.
It definitely makes you appreciate the physical act of speaking on a whole new level.
Speaking of thinking and the complexity of processing language,
Yeah.
one of the sources, Source 10, leaves us with a final, rather profound and appropriately complex thought to chew on. It's another twister, but this one feels more conceptual than just phonetic, although the structure itself is definitely part of the challenge. Denn denke nie, du denkst, denn wenn du denkst, dann denkst du nicht, dann denkst du nur, du denkst, denn das Denken der Gedanken ist gedankenloses Denken.
Which translates roughly to, never think you think. Because when you think, then you don't think, then you only think you think, because the thinking of thoughts is thoughtless thinking. Wow.
Yeah. What does that final twister, this kind of mind-bending loop about thinking itself, add to the picture for you? It's not just about tricky sounds. It's about a complex idea expressed through this dense, repetitive, maybe slightly nonsensical structure that still needs precise articulation. Is the kind of thinking required to execute these complex linguistic acrobatics, this rapid, automated, precise, scharfer Zungenschlag, without any Verweilen, without lingering, is that different from other kinds of thinking? Could the act of reaching that peak or tactobath performance involve a state where your conscious analytical thinking about what you're saying actually gives way to a more automatic, flawless execution, almost becoming thoughtless thinking in that specific performance moment?
It does make you ponder the relationship between conscious thought, the intricate mechanics of speech production, and that state of flow required to perform these linguistic acrobatics perfectly.
Is the ultimate goal maybe to transcend conscious thinking while you're speaking, allowing the highly trained acrobatic to become an automatic, perfect performance? It certainly challenges our definition of what it means to think when you're engaged in such a demanding verbal act.
Something truly complex to think about. Or, perhaps, to achieve thoughtless execution of.
Indeed.
Until our next deep dive.